The number is $1.46 million. That is the number many Americans now believe they need to retire comfortably. It is a big number. It is also a dangerous number. Not because saving too much is bad. Saving and investing aggressively is usually a good thing. The danger is that when people hear a number this large, many of them do not become more disciplined. They become hopeless. They say, "I will never get there." Then they stop doing the math. That is the tragedy. A fear-based number can destroy action before a real plan ever begins. This is one of the biggest mistakes people make in money. They confuse a feeling with a calculation. They hear a headline, absorb the anxiety, and then begin making life decisions around an emotional estimate that may not apply to them at all. The $1.46 million number sounds precise. It sounds like research. It sounds like someone calculated what retirement costs and delivered the answer. But for most people, that is not what happened. Many people are not sitting down with a spreadsheet and asking what they spend, what Social Security will cover, what housing will cost, what their tax situation will be, what their withdrawal rate should be, and what kind of portfolio can support their lifestyle. They are reacting. They see inflation headlines every day. They see grocery prices. They see rents. They see insurance premiums. They see home prices. They see medical costs. They see people online saying retirement is impossible. Then someone asks them how much they think they need to retire, and their brain reaches for a number that feels safe a lot. That is the answer their nervous system gives. Not math a lot. That is availability bias. Availability bias means the things that are most emotionally present in your mind feel more probable, more dangerous, and more important than they may actually be when analyzed with numbers. If the news shows inflation again and again, your brain begins to overestimate the retirement danger. If every conversation is about prices going up, you begin to assume that no amount will ever be enough. If you see one scary retirement headline after another, you may choose a large round number simply because fear wants a large answer. This is how a headline becomes a psychological trap. The number may be useful as a general signal that people are worried, but it is not your retirement plan. Your retirement plan has to be built from your actual life, your income, your spending, your Social Security estimate, your housing situation, your debt, your age, your savings, your investments, your taxes, your health, your flexibility, your willingness to keep working part-time, your margin of safety. A national average cannot tell you those things. That is why the first principle is simple. Do not retire on vibes, retire on math. When you use the wrong number, two bad things can happen. The first is that you give up. You look at $1.46 million and decide the gap is too large. You assume retirement is impossible, then you delay investing, or you invest too little, or you avoid learning because the destination feels unreachable. The second is that you stress yourself out chasing a number you may not need. You work longer than necessary, you live with unnecessary anxiety, you become afraid to spend, even when your plan is safe. You make money the master instead of the tool. Both are mistakes. One comes from despair, the other comes from fear. The solution is math. So let us start with a more grounded framework. The median household income for people between 55 and 64 is about $78,000 a year in the Source S framework. A common retirement planning rule says you may need to replace about 80% of pre-retirement income to maintain a similar lifestyle. 80% of $78,000 is $62,400. That means a household earning $78,000 before retirement might target about $62,400 a year in retirement income. Why less than 100%? Because some expenses often fall in retirement. You may stop contributing to retirement accounts. Payroll taxes may change. Commuting costs may fall. Work clothing, meals, and professional expenses may decrease. Some debts may be paid off. Children may be independent. Your spending pattern may change. This is not guaranteed. Some expenses can rise, especially healthcare, travel, family support, and long-term care. But the 80% rule gives a starting point. Now we apply the 4% rule. The 4% rule says that if you withdraw about 4% of your portfolio in the first year of retirement and then adjust that withdrawal for inflation, your money has historically had a strong chance of lasting at least 30 years under many market conditions. It is not a law. It is not a guarantee. It is a framework. But frameworks are useful because they make fuzzy problems calculable. If you need $62,400 a year and your portfolio must supply all of it, then you divide $62,400 by 4%. That gives $1.56 million at first. That seems to support the scary headline. In fact, it is even higher than $1.46 million. But that calculation leaves out one of the largest income sources for most American retirees. Social Security. The average Social Security benefit in the Source S framework is about $22,320 per year, or roughly $1,860 per month. That changes the math dramatically. If your target income is $62,400 and Social Security provides about $22,320, then your portfolio does not need to produce $62,400. It needs to produce about $40,000. Now divide $40,000 by 4%. That gives $1 million, not $1.46 million. That is already a very different conversation. $1 million is still a lot of money. It still requires saving and investing. It still requires time. But it is not the same as $1.46 million. And for many people, the number can be lower still because of housing. Housing is the biggest financial variable in retirement. If your mortgage is not paid off, retirement is much more expensive. If your mortgage is paid off, the entire system changes. The source uses an average mortgage payment of about $2,300 per month. That is $27,600 per year. If that payment disappears by retirement, your required retirement income can fall substantially. This is why paying off a mortgage can be boring and powerful at the same time. It is not exciting. It does not look like a hot stock. It does not make people on social media applaud. But in retirement math, removing a large fixed payment changes everything. Suppose your annual expenses fall to about $45,000 because your home is paid off. If Social Security covers around $22,000 of that, then your portfolio only needs to produce roughly $23,000 per year. Divide $23,000 by 4%, that is $575,000, not $1.46 million. That is the difference between fear and math. The headline says you need nearly $1.5 million. The math may say you need $575,000 depending on your spending, housing, and Social Security. That is not a bare bones rice and beans retirement. That can be a comfortable retirement if your expenses are structured correctly and your housing cost is under control. But notice what really matters, not the national average, your fixed costs, your Social Security, your housing, your spending, your portfolio income. The retirement number is not one number, it is an equation. And once you see the equation, the fear begins to fall. This is how I like to think about it. There are two ways to get retirement wrong. The first is to underestimate what you need. That is dangerous because you may run out of money. The second is to overestimate what you need so badly that you become paralyzed. That is also dangerous because you may never start. A good plan avoids both. It is conservative but not hysterical. It respects risk but does not worship fear. It uses actual inputs instead of headlines. Now, some people will immediately say Social Security will not be there. That fear is understandable because the program does have long-term funding issues. The trust fund is under pressure. Demographics are difficult. More retirees are drawing benefits. Fewer workers support each retiree compared with the past. But saying Social Security has funding issues is different from saying Social Security will vanish. Even in a stress scenario, payroll taxes can still fund a significant portion of promised benefits. The source uses a figure of around 78% of scheduled benefits from ongoing payroll tax revenue. So let us stress test the math. If the average annual benefit is about $22,320 and benefits were cut by about 20%, then the benefit might be closer to $17,800. Now take the $62,400 retirement income target and subtract $17,800. That leaves about $44,600 that the portfolio needs to produce. Divide that by 4%. That gives about $1.115 million, still below $1.46 million. Again, this does not mean you should ignore Social Security risk. It means you should model it instead of panicking about it. A mature plan asks, what happens if Social Security pays full benefits? What happens if it pays 80%? What happens if I claim later? What happens if I claim earlier? What happens if I work longer? What happens if my spouse has a benefit? What happens if taxes change? That is planning. Fear says it will all disappear. Planning says let us stress test the income sources. This difference matters. Now let us look at the most important part of retirement planning, expenses. Most people focus on the size of the portfolio. They should focus first on the size of the life that portfolio must support. A $1 million portfolio can be plenty for one household and not enough for another. A $575,000 portfolio can be workable for a household with low expenses, paid off housing, and Social Security. A $2 million portfolio can feel tight for a household with expensive housing, high taxes, large healthcare costs, adult children needing support, debt, and lifestyle inflation. The number by itself means nothing. The number only matters in relation to spending. This is why financial freedom is not just about assets. It is about the relationship between assets and expenses. A person with $700,000 and $35,000 of annual spending may be in a stronger position than a person with $1.5 million and $120,000 of annual spending. That surprises people because they think wealth is the asset number. But freedom is not the asset number. Freedom is the ratio. Assets divided by required spending, that ratio tells you how much time and security you have. This is why paying off a mortgage can be so powerful. It lowers the denominator, it reduces the amount the portfolio must support, it reduces the pressure on investment returns, it reduces sequence of returns risk, it reduces the psychological stress of retirement. Boring is beautiful. In finance, boring often wins because boring reduces fragility. A paid-off home is boring. Low fixed expenses are boring. A broad index fund is boring. A consistent monthly investment is boring. Avoiding high-interest debt is boring. But these boring things create freedom. The world sells excitement because excitement is profitable for someone else. Retirement is usually built by boredom that compounds. Now, let us look at the accumulation side. If you are 30 years old and invest $500 per month into a broad market index fund, averaging around 10% annually, the source S Math says that by age 65, you can have about $1.131 million. That is more than enough to cover the $1 million target we calculated when Social Security is included. Not $5,000 per month, not $10,000 per month, $500 per month. Now, $500 per month is not easy for everyone, for some households. It is very difficult, but it is not impossible in the way $1.46 million feels impossible. If you increase that to $750 per month, the ending value can be about $1.697 million. That exceeds even the scary headline number. This is the power of time. Time is the greatest retirement asset young people have, and many of them waste it because the early numbers feel small at the beginning. $500 per month does not look impressive. After 1 year, it is only $6,000 before returns. After a few years, the balance may still feel modest. The person may compare it to the cost of a house or the $1.46 million headline and feel like it does not matter. That is a mistake. Compounding starts slowly because the base is small. Then the base grows, then the returns begin to earn returns, then the machine becomes powerful. The problem is that most people quit before the machine becomes visible. They say this is not working. It is working. It is just early. Compounding is quiet for years and then loud later. That is why starting matters so much. Now, what about someone who is 40? The source gives a useful example. A 40-year-old makes $85,000 a year, has $50,000 saved, expects the home to be paid off by 62, and invests $600 per month into an SP 500 ETF like VOO. At a 10% average annual return, by age 65, the portfolio can grow to about $849,000. Now compare that to the retirement need if Social Security at that income level is around $24,000 per year and the house is paid off. Annual expenses might be roughly $42,000. That means the portfolio only needs to provide about $18,000 per year. 4% of $849,000 is about $34,000. That is almost double what is needed. This is a very important example because it shows how retirement can become possible even when someone does not have a perfect start. A person at 40 with $50,000 saved might feel behind. They may hear $1.46 million and decide they are doomed. But the actual math says they may be far better positioned than they think if they invest consistently, keep housing under control, and avoid letting expenses explode. That is the danger of headline numbers. They make people who still have a path believe the path is gone. When people believe the path is gone, they stop walking. That is the real damage. Now, the important question is what assumptions are inside the math. A 10% average annual return is based on long-term historical averages for the SP 500. That does not mean the future will return exactly 10%. It does not mean returns will arrive evenly. It does not mean there will be no crashes. The stock market can fall sharply. It can underperform for years. Inflation can change real returns. Valuations can matter. Sequence of returns can matter. Fees and taxes can matter. Behavior can matter more than all of it. So the point is not that 10% is guaranteed. The point is that the math of long-term investing is far more powerful than fear. Based thinking allows people to see. You can also stress test lower returns. At 8%, the ending balance will be lower. At 7%, lower still. That does not destroy the plan. It means contributions may need to rise, expenses may need to fall, retirement age may need to shift, or the housing plan may matter more. This is why a plan should have margins. The purpose of planning is not to create a perfect forecast. The purpose is to build a system that can survive imperfect outcomes. That means you do not put every hope on one exact return number. You save enough, you invest consistently. You keep fees low, you avoid high-interest debt, you control expenses. You plan for Social Security uncertainty, you think about health care, you make housing decisions carefully, you stay flexible. That is the system. Now let us talk about simplicity. The source mentions broad market index funds like VU, dividend-oriented ETFs like SHI-D, and growth-oriented ETFs like QQM and SHI-AG as examples of simple portfolio building blocks. The deeper point is not that everyone must own those exact funds. The deeper point is that retirement investing does not need to be complicated. Most people do not need a portfolio full of exotic strategies. They do not need 27 funds. They do not need to trade every week. They do not need to predict every Fed decision. They do not need to find the next 10-bagger. They do not need to understand every option strategy. They need to own productive assets at low cost for a long time. That is the core. A broad market index fund gives exposure to the productive economy, a dividend or quality. Oriented fund can provide a tilt toward established companies and income characteristics. A growth fund can provide exposure to companies expected to grow faster, though with more volatility. Those are building blocks. The exact mix depends on risk tolerance, age, goals, and personality. But the principle is simple. Let the economy work for you. Do not try to outsmart it every month. The power is not only in the fund, the power is in the behavior, buying consistently, reinvesting dividends, keeping costs low, not panic selling, not chasing every trend, not stopping because headlines are scary, not giving up because the target looks large. This is the part most people miss. They think retirement is solved by finding the perfect investment. Usually, retirement is solved by consistent contributions into good enough investments, held long enough for compounding to matter. Good enough plus time often beats brilliant plus emotional instability. That is one of the most reliable truths in personal finance. Now let us talk about the 4% rule more carefully. The 4% rule is not magic. It comes from historical analysis of portfolios across different market periods, asking how much could be withdrawn without running out of money over a long retirement. But no rule can guarantee the future. The 4% rule works better when the portfolio is diversified, fees are low, withdrawals are flexible, and the investor can adjust spending when markets perform poorly. It works worse when the investor retires at a market peak, withdrawals are rigid. Inflation is high, investment returns are low, taxes are underestimated, or healthcare expenses rise unexpectedly. This is called sequence of returns risk. If the market falls sharply early in retirement and you keep withdrawing the same amount from a shrinking portfolio, the damage can be lasting. That is why retirement is not only about the total number on day one, it is also about timing, flexibility, and asset allocation. This is where many simplistic retirement headlines fail. They say you need X dollars, but they do not ask how much flexibility you have. If markets are down, can you reduce spending? Can you delay a major trip? Can you work part-time? Can you use cash reserves? Can you draw from a different account? Can you delay Social Security? Can you adjust? Flexibility reduces the need for a giant fear number. Rigidity increases the need for more capital. That is another principle. The less flexible your expenses are, the more capital you need. If your retirement spending includes a large mortgage, high insurance costs, debt payments, expensive travel obligations, and little ability to adjust, you need more money. If your housing is paid off, debt is gone, and discretionary spending can flex, you need less. This is why expense structure matters more than people realize. Retirement is not only an investment problem, it is a spending design problem. Now, let us talk about housing again. A paid-off house can reduce required income, but it is not always the perfect answer for everyone. If you have a very low fixed mortgage rate, paying it off early may not be mathematically optimal if you can earn more by investing. If your liquidity is low, putting every dollar into home equity may create a problem, because a house is not easily spendable. If your home is too large, property taxes, insurance, maintenance, and utilities may remain expensive even without a mortgage. So the principle is not always pay off the house no matter what. The principle is understand what housing does to retirement math. Housing is usually the largest fixed cost. If you control housing, retirement becomes much easier. That control can come from paying off a mortgage. It can come from downsizing. It can come from relocating. It can come from renting strategically. It can come from house hacking. It can come from owning a smaller home than the bank says you can afford. The method can vary. The goal is to reduce the required portfolio income. That is the powerful lever. Most people try to solve retirement only by increasing the numerator, meaning the portfolio, but you can also improve the equation by reducing the denominator, meaning expenses. Both matter. If you increase assets and reduce required spending, the plan becomes much stronger. Now, let us address fear directly. 46% of Americans saying they do not think they will ever be financially prepared for retirement is a serious signal. It means the country has a confidence problem. Some of that fear is justified. Many people are behind. Many have debt. Many face high housing costs. Many started late. Many do not have pensions. Many do not know how to invest. Many have seen inflation erode their sense of safety, but some of the fear is amplified by headlines that make retirement feel impossible. When people feel retirement is impossible, they often stop doing the small things that make it possible. That is irrational but human. If the mountain looks too high, the person may refuse to take the first step. That is why realistic math is so valuable. It shrinks the mountain not by lying, by measuring. If your real number is $1 million, you can plan for it. If your real number is $575,000, you can plan for it. If your real number is $1.115 million under a Social Security haircut, you can plan for it. If your real number is $2 million because your spending is high, you can plan for that too. The important thing is that the number comes from your life, not from fear. Now let us talk about what happens when a person starts late. Starting late is not ideal, but it is not a death sentence. It changes the levers. A person starting at 25 has time. A person starting at 45 needs higher contributions, lower expenses, possibly longer work, and more deliberate planning. A person starting at 5th of May need to make harder choices about housing, spending, work, and Social Security timing. But action still matters. If you are behind, do not use shame as an excuse to do nothing. That is another trap. Shame says, I should have started earlier, so now it is too late. Math says, here is the current position, here are the possible levers, and here is what improvement looks like. Use math, not shame. The levers are always the same. Earn more, spend less, save more, invest better, reduce fees, pay off bad debt, control housing, delay retirement if needed, work part-time if useful. Delay Social Security if it improves lifetime benefit and fits your health and cash flow. Use tax-advantaged accounts when possible. Stay invested. Each lever may be difficult, but they are real. A person who starts late cannot change the past, but can still change the trajectory. The worst outcome is believing the headline number is impossible and doing nothing. Doing nothing guarantees fragility. Now let us think about Social Security timing. The source uses average benefit numbers, but your actual benefit depends on your earnings history and claiming age. Claiming early reduces monthly benefits. Delaying can increase them up to a point. For some people, delaying Social Security can be one of the best guaranteed income decisions they make, especially if they expect long life. Have other assets to bridge the gap and want inflation. Adjusted income later for others. Claiming earlier may make sense because of health, employment, cash flow, or family circumstances. Again, there is no one-size-fits-all answer. The principle is to make the decision intentionally. Social Security is not only a number, it is an income stream, it is adjusted for inflation, it can reduce portfolio withdrawals, it can reduce longevity risk, it can reduce the amount you need invested. That is why ignoring it entirely can make retirement seem much scarier than it is, but depending on it entirely is also dangerous. The balanced view is to model it conservatively and then build your portfolio to supplement it. Now, let us talk about the emotional danger of big numbers. The human mind is not good at large financial goals. $1 million feels abstract. 1.46 million feels even more abstract. When a goal feels abstract, people either fantasize or give up. A better approach is to convert the big number into a monthly behavior. If you need $1 million and you are 30, the behavior might be $500 per month into a broad index fund under the Source S assumptions. If you need $1.46 million, the behavior might be closer to $750 per month under the same assumptions. If you are 40 with $50,000 saved, the behavior might be $600 per month plus controlling housing and expenses. Now the goal is no longer an abstract mountain. It is a monthly system. This is how wealth is built. Not by staring at the final number every day, by building the repeated behavior that makes the final number possible. The brain handles habits better than huge distant goals. So create the habit, automate the investment, increase contributions when income rises, avoid lifestyle inflation, reinvest dividends, keep buying through downturns, review annually. That is much better than waking up every day asking whether you have $1.46 million yet. Now the source emphasizes keeping investing simple. That is valuable because complexity is often a way people avoid action. They say, I need to understand everything before I start. No, you do not. You need to understand enough to begin responsibly. A broad low-cost index fund is not perfect, but it is a good starting point for many long-term investors. Over time, you can learn more about asset allocation, bonds, dividend funds, growth funds, international exposure, tax strategy, and withdrawal planning. But waiting until you know everything can cost years of compounding, and years matter. A person who starts at 30 with imperfect simplicity may do better than a person who waits until 40 for perfect knowledge. Investing simplified is not investing stupidly. It means focusing on the few variables that matter most: savings rate, time, asset allocation, costs, taxes, behavior, diversification. Those variables drive most of the outcome. Now, there's another important idea. Retirement comfort is personal. Some people want to travel internationally every year, help children with homes, maintain an expensive property, and live in a high-cost city. They need more. Some people want a paid-off home, modest travel, time with family, hobbies, and a stable lifestyle. They need less. Neither is morally superior, but they require different math. You cannot borrow someone else's number without borrowing their life. That is why $1.46 million is not universally wrong or universally right. For some people, it may be too low. For many people, it may be too high. For others, it may be close. The point is that you must calculate your number. A useful retirement number begins with expenses, not assets. What does your life cost now? What will disappear in retirement? What will increase? Will the mortgage be gone? Will you move? Will you pay for health care before Medicare? Will you support family? Will you travel more? Will taxes change? Will you claim Social Security early or late? Will you work part-time? Then calculate the gap between spending and guaranteed income. That gap is what your portfolio must cover. Then divide the gap by a reasonable withdrawal rate. That is your starting number. This is the structure. Annual retirement spending minus Social Security and other reliable income equals the required portfolio income. Required portfolio income divided by the withdrawal rate equals the portfolio target. That is the math. Once you know the target, then you calculate the monthly investment required to reach it. This is how fear becomes a plan. Now, let us talk about the role of inflation. Inflation is the reason people are scared. They are not irrational to feel pressure. Prices have risen. Housing has become more expensive. Insurance has risen. Groceries have risen. Many people feel poorer, even if wages are higher. Inflation matters in retirement because retirees often live on fixed or semi-fixed income. If spending rises faster than portfolio income, the plan becomes stressed. This is why Social Security's cost of living adjustment is valuable even if it does not perfectly match your personal inflation. It is also why the portfolio usually needs growth exposure. A retirement portfolio that is too conservative can lose purchasing power. Cash and short-term instruments may feel safe, but over 20 or 30 years, inflation can do serious damage. Equities are volatile, but they provide ownership in businesses that can raise prices and grow earnings over time. This is the trade-off. You need stability and growth. Too much risk can damage you in market crashes. Too little risk can damage you through inflation. That is why retirement portfolios usually need balance. The right balance changes with age, spending flexibility, guaranteed income, and risk tolerance. Again, there is no one answer. There is a process. Now, let us talk about the psychological difference between portfolio value and income value. Many people think, I have $500,000. Is that enough? But the better question is, what income can this support? At 4%, $500,000 supports about $20,000 per year. At 4%, $1 million supports about $40,000 per year. At 4%, $1.46 million supports about $58,400 per year. These numbers become meaningful only when compared to your expenses and Social Security. A $500,000 portfolio may be enough for someone who needs only $20,000 from the portfolio after Social Security. It is not enough for someone who needs $80,000 from the portfolio. That is the clarity. Capital must be translated into income. Income must be translated into lifestyle. Lifestyle must be translated into required capital. This is how retirement math works. Now, why do many headlines ignore this? Because headlines need one number. A study can report an average answer from thousands of people. That is interesting, but it is not planning. The media then turns the average answer into a psychological event. People read it and feel behind. The number gets repeated. Then it becomes a cultural reference point. But average perception is not average need. That is the flaw. A survey asking what people think they need captures fear, expectations, and sentiment. It does not necessarily capture the portfolio target required for each household. That is why you must separate sentiment data from planning data. The $1.46 million number may tell us Americans are anxious. It does not tell you what you need. Now let us think about why Americans feel so anxious. They have reasons. The pension system has weakened for many workers. Many people must fund their own retirement through 401ks and IRAs. Healthcare is expensive. Housing is expensive. Inflation has hurt trust. People live longer. Financial education is weak. The stock market feels risky. Social Security headlines are scary. So the fear is understandable, but the solution is still not fear. The solution is financial education and action. When people understand the equation, they regain control. They see that retirement is not one impossible pile of money. It is a system of income sources and spending needs. Social Security, portfolio withdrawals, housing costs, spending taxes, healthcare investment returns, flexibility, each can be adjusted. That is empowering. Now, if you are young, the message is simple. Start. Do not wait until you feel rich. Do not wait until the market feels safe. Do not wait until you know every detail. Start with a simple broad low. Cost fund if appropriate, automate contributions, increase them over time, avoid high-interest debt, keep housing and transportation from consuming your future. Let compounding work if you are 30 and can invest $500 per month. You may be building more retirement security than you realize. If you can invest $750 per month, the math becomes even stronger. The key is consistency. If you are in middle age, the message is also simple. Do the math. Do not assume you are doomed because you started late. Calculate spending, estimate Social Security, look at housing, decide how much the portfolio must provide. Then raise contributions as much as possible. Control lifestyle inflation and reduce fixed costs. If your home will be paid off, recognize the power of that. If it will not, decide whether that is a problem and what choices you have. If you are close to retirement, the message is more cautious. You need to translate assets into income. You need to manage sequence risk. You need to understand Social Security timing. You need to think about healthcare, taxes, and spending flexibility. You need to avoid panic or overconfidence. A retirement plan should not be based on a headline. It should be based on cash flows. Now, let us address a subtle danger. Some people may hear that they do not need $1.46 million and use that as an excuse to undersave. That would be the wrong lesson. The lesson is not save less. The lesson is calculate better. If you can save more, save more. More savings creates margin. Margin gives flexibility. Flexibility reduces stress. If you end up with more than you need, you can retire earlier, help family, travel more, give more, or leave a legacy. But do not let a fear-based number make you give up. And do not let a lower calculated number make you lazy. The right response is disciplined confidence. You can say, I may not need the scary headline number, but I will still build aggressively because margin is valuable. That is the mature view. Now let us discuss the difference between retirement readiness and retirement luxury. A comfortable retirement is not the same as an unlimited retirement. Comfortable means the important expenses are covered. You have margin for emergencies, you can enjoy life, and your money is unlikely to run out under reasonable assumptions. Unlimited means you can spend without much concern. Most people do not need unlimited, they need reliable. They need housing, food, healthcare, transportation, family, some travel, hobbies, dignity, peace. That kind of retirement can often be achieved with much less than the number people imagine if expenses are structured correctly. The key is not deprivation, the key is design a well-designed financial life is cheaper than a chaotic one. Debt makes life expensive. High housing costs make life expensive. Consumer payments make life expensive. Lifestyle inflation makes life expensive. Poor tax planning makes life expensive. High investment fees make life expensive. A simple, controlled, intentional life reduces the portfolio required for freedom. That is not a small advantage. Now let us connect this to the broader economic system. The system wants people to feel they need huge amounts of money, but it also sells them products that prevent them from building it. Expensive cars, large homes, credit card debt, subscriptions, status spending, high fee funds, lifestyle upgrades. If you believe retirement requires $1.46 million and you simultaneously spend every dollar trying to look successful now, retirement becomes impossible. But if you define your number correctly and build a spending system that supports it, the goal becomes much more reachable. That is why personal finance is a system. The retirement number is not separate from the car payment. The mortgage, the eating out, the credit card balance, the investment fee, and the monthly contribution. Everything connects. A lower-cost life reduces the target. A higher savings rate increases the probability. A low-cost portfolio improves compounding. A paid-off home reduces required income. Social Security reduces portfolio pressure. The 4% rule turns capital into income. This is the machine. If you understand the machine, you can stop being controlled by headlines. Now, let us be honest about uncertainty. Markets may return less than historical averages. Social Security may be cut. Healthcare costs may rise. Inflation may remain sticky. You may live longer than expected. Taxes may change. Family needs may appear. A long bear market may arrive early in retirement. These risks are real. A responsible plan does not ignore them. It builds margin. Maybe you use a lower withdrawal rate than 4%. Maybe you target more than the minimum. Maybe you delay retirement by a year or two. Maybe you pay off debt before retiring. Maybe you hold a cash reserve. Maybe you keep some part-time income. Maybe you reduce discretionary spending during bad markets. Maybe you diversify. The answer to uncertainty is not panic, it is margin. Margin turns uncertainty from a disaster into a manageable variable. This is why the headline number is crude. It does not tell you the margin you personally need. Only your plan can do that. Now let us return to the main emotional point. Many Americans think they will never be financially prepared for retirement. That belief is dangerous because beliefs shape behavior. If you believe you cannot win, you stop playing. If you believe the target is reachable with a system, you act. The difference between those two beliefs can be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars over a lifetime. So you must be careful what numbers you let into your mind. A big, scary average can become a self-fulfilling defeat. A realistic personal number can become a plan. That is why I want people to do the math themselves. Even rough math is better than fear. Write down your expected retirement spending. Subtract Social Security or a conservative estimate of it. Subtract any pension or reliable income. Find the gap, divide by 4% or a more conservative number, if appropriate. That is your portfolio target. Then calculate what monthly contribution can get you there. Now you have a plan. It may show that you are on track. It may show that you are behind. Either result is better than guessing because guessing creates anxiety, math creates action. Now let us summarize the chain. The headline says Americans think they need $1.46 million. That number is based on perception, not a personal plan. A more realistic starting point uses income replacement, Social Security, housing costs. And the 4% rule, a household earning $78,000 may target $62,400 in retirement income. Without Social Security, that implies around $1.56 million. With average Social Security, the portfolio need may fall to around $1 million. With a paid-off home and lower expenses, it may fall to around $575,000. Even with a Social Security cut, the needed portfolio may still be far below the headline number. A 30-year-old investing $500 per month at historical SP 500. Like returns may reach more than $1 million by 65. A 40-year-old with $50,000 saved investing $600 per month. And controlling housing costs may still be in a much stronger position than the headline suggests. The lesson is not that retirement is easy. The lesson is that retirement is calculable. That is the key. When something is calculable, it can be managed. When something is only feared, it controls you. So stop fearing the headline. Build the equation, then follow the system. Save, invest, keep costs low, control housing, avoid bad debt. Use Social Security intelligently. Understand the 4% rule, stress test assumptions. Keep the portfolio simple enough to hold. And most of all, start, because the person who starts with imperfect math is still ahead of the person who waits for a perfect feeling. The feeling may never come. The math is available now. That is where control begins.